All right, everybody, the watch on my clock, which is my brain, is now clicking over to 2. And since you're all here on time, I think I'd like to get started for you. We may have some people coming on in, but let's get started. So welcome, everybody. It is great to spend some time with you this afternoon or this morning or middle of the night, wherever you are, on the topic of online dispute resolution, and to be talking about online dispute resolution for contesting and resolving misdemeanors in Texas with our panel. You'll see their faces on the screen. We have Kevin Barrett from Court Administrator, Texas Farmers Branch Municipal Court in Texas, and Nicole Corr, who is the prosecutor in there. I will introduce them more fully in a moment, but before we get started, I want to make sure that you're comfortable in the Zoom environment. So let's just take a moment to go over that. You should see at the bottom of your screen a little black bar that has some controls. For those who are attending, the controls are going to be, I think there's going to be a Q&A for you. There's also the ability to join a chat. The Q&A will be encouraging you to just drop questions as you go through there. We're going to give a presentation. I'll talk a little bit, and then we'll hear from Kevin and Nicole, and they'll share their experience with online dispute resolution in Farmers Branch. And as you think of questions, please just drop them into the Q&A widget. I see a question already from Rosa Junquiero, and her question is, are the slides available for download and handouts? And yes, we're going to post a link by tomorrow with the slides as well as the recording of the webinar so that you can access it and share it should you want to with folks on your larger teams. So that's an example of using, thank you Rosa for your help, using the Q&A widget. I'm curious if you wouldn't mind, my name is Dunry Greiling and I am the product director for Matterhorn. I lead the product team and I'll tell you a little bit more about me as well in a second. But I'm here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Our panel is from, of course, Texas, but I think there are people on this webinar from all over. We had registrants from within Texas, from across the US, from our neighboring country to the north, Canada, and as far away as Australia. So I'm curious if some of you would be willing to test out the Zoom functionality by jumping on the chat and letting us know where you're coming from, just in a phrase. Well, maybe your state, maybe your country. We've got a Chicago, Highland Village, Texas, Minnesota. All right. More Texas, Nevada, New Jersey, Atlanta, Georgia, Hawaii. Oh, Hawaii, very nice. Florida. Wonderful. So yeah, we've got folks from all around the US interested in this topic of online dispute resolution in Texas, as well as my home state of Michigan. Thank you and welcome. All right, so everybody should now be a little more familiar with the Zoom controls, and please do not hesitate to use them, particularly the Q&A widget, because we want to talk for about the first 40 minutes, and then we would like to answer your questions for the last third. And so getting those questions queued up and in there, and then we will use them. If we are not able to answer your question, we commit to following up with you afterwards by email. And at the end of this, you will have the contact information for me and for our panelists so that you can get any of your questions answered. All righty, so ready to go, here we go. Oh, and I have to hit forward on the slides. All right, so my name is Dunry Greiling. I will be your host and moderator, and I run the product team here at Matterhorn Online Dispute Resolution, which means that I get to work with fun, innovative people across the country and across the world who use our software and who are pioneers in getting court process serving the public online. And I'm super excited to introduce today our panel. we have, you can see this photo on the slide as well as his picture. You should be able to see that on the screen as well as he's talking. We have Kevin Barrett, who is the court administrator from Farmers Branch Municipal Court. And I'm going to look at my bio here so I don't mess it up. He started as a court clerk and has been promoted 4 times in the city of Farmers Branch. And so he's had what that does is it gives him a great insight into what each of the roles does within the court. And so that I think has helped him be successful in his role. And he has a commitment to modernizing and utilizing technology resources, which is kind of how we get here to sharing the story of his court offering this service online. Yeah, he has also his colleague here on the webinar is Nicole Corr. She is a senior associate with Nichols, Jackson, Dillard, Hager, and Smith. And she also spent a time with large international law firms as well. She works as part of her work week, part of her work month is serving as the city prosecutor in Farmers Branch. Welcome, Kevin, and welcome, Nicole. And feel free to, if I got any part of your bio wrong, chime in and correct me in front of all these people who would like to understand. Sound okay?
You're good.
Kevin? Okay. Maybe Nicole?
Yes, you're good.
Okay.
Pretty much sums it up.
Okay, great. Well, so maybe one of the questions that I have, and I'm going to start with a softball, is where is this place called Farmers Branch? What's it like? Just so that people who aren't familiar with the geography of Texas have a sense of whether your court is similar or different from theirs. Could you just give me like give us a little intro, and I'll let you do it so that you know Farmers Branch much better than we do. Kevin.
All right, since our attorney's on the phone, she'll stop me if I say anything wrong. So we are a suburb of the city of Dallas, and so I think we make that like tier 1, meaning we actually touch the city of Dallas, so we're one of the first suburbs to kind of pop up for suburbia, which DFW has kind of become a huge cluster of giant suburbs that's going to go to Oklahoma one day. And it's pretty, we have about a 30,000 population, 30 to 35,000 population. And then during the day, it balloons up to like 150,000. So lots of business.
All right, so thank you for a little introduction to Farmers Branch. So I want to spend just a little bit of time before we start talking about why ODR is important. And I think those of you who jumped on, who decided to attend this webinar were interested in ODR. So I'm not going to belabor this section because you wouldn't be here if you weren't curious about ODR. Online dispute resolution helps people deal with legal matters. Court-connected online dispute resolution helps people deal with legal matters without necessarily having to go to court. There are reasons why somebody may not be able to get there, such as they may need to be at work. They may need to care for a family member, a small child, an elderly person. They may not have the money or the ability to get there transportation-wise. But there also may be a barrier in that they may find court intimidating and unclear. So there's a lot of reasons why people may not be able to have some challenges getting to court. And one of the goals behind online dispute resolution is sort of lowering that barrier, increasing access so people can get ahead, get right with any legal challenges that they've got. And that has motivated us at Matterhorn, and that has motivated our courts. And I think Kevin can speak directly to that. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, I won't belabor this too much either, but one working definition of online dispute resolution, court ODR, is a court-annexed, public-facing digital space where parties can convene to facilitate a resolution to their dispute or their case. So you might, I think often we're thinking of it in a setting of small claims, And Matterhorn does help with that as well. But today we're focusing on a different kind of case, the resolution of misdemeanors online. And this is the type of cases that Matterhorn can help with. Civil cases, domestic relations cases, traffic misdemeanors, the resolution of warrants, and the assessment of ability to pay. And we help in several ways, but that I think are best exemplified telling the story of a court case in Farmers Branch. A lot of you shared your questions ahead when you registered, and many of the questions were, I'm just trying to figure out how this works, and I want to see the flow. So that's what we're going to do today. And the other thing that I should have said is that there are proven benefits to offering access to court services online. There's a great resource from the Joint Technology Committee, which is part of CASCA, the National Center for State Courts, and the National Association for Court Management has come together, this Joint Technology Committee resource that's in the bottom of this slide here. And some of the benefits that they call out are increasing access, increasing efficiency for the staffing of the court, improving collections and enforcement, as well as fairness and customer satisfaction. And so we'll talk about the flow as well as these specific benefits with Kevin and Nicole. All right, so that's our introduction. And now we'll be sharing, I'll turn over the talking to Kevin and then Nicole as well, who will walk us through the motivation in Farmers Branch, as well as one example case of a traffic case in the court. All right, handing it over to you, Kevin.
All right, this is which slide, 11 or 6? Do you have? I can't hear anything you said.
Well, that was silly. I muted myself.
There you go.
So yeah, it says online resolution launched January 2018 is the slide. I've got 9 on the screen right now.
9, okay.
And it's got your motivation as well as your landing page for online case review.
All right. So for us, my biggest motivation was public expectation, period. I mean, we used to get questions all the time, which is, why can't I just do this online? Or why did I have to come up here? Why did I have to stand in line? And our answer to that was, because that's the way it's always been done. I mean, that's pretty much, that was pretty much the answer for the most part. People hadn't really done enough to get out of the box and kind of say, how can I make this better? They just kind of went with the flow. And then I also, I think a lot about the future. So I started to think about where our court was going to be in 10 years and where we were going to be in 20 years. And I started thinking, I realized that we had to continue to get more lean and more automated as time goes on, because that's what the public expects. I mean, if private companies can do it, we should be able to do it as well. So that was a big motivation of mine, to be able to continue to have a municipal court for people that actually want to be heard in that type of thing. Those things won't necessarily be around in the same fashion, in my belief, in another 10 or 20 years. So, and the things that are around are going to be drastically different, I think. So, the other thing is, of course, safety, because the less people you have coming through your building, the less chance you'll have, hopefully, of any type of incident. And then it also saves a lot of resources, a ton of resources. I will say that. So we actually just learned that we are the, what did you call it? The first in Texas and fastest growing online dispute resolution.
That's right. Yeah, so yeah, they've just started this year. I'm going to jump in just for a sec because it's hard. It's easier for me to toot Farmers Branch's horn than maybe it is for Kevin. You can see on the chart on the right of the slide here the change in growth over time. They launched in January of this year, 2018, and they you can see, kind of can draw a trend line through the up and down of holidays and such. But month over month growth in the usage by the public, as well as they are now in the traffic and misdemeanor world of Matterhorn. They are our largest volume court, so they are biggest and fastest growing, which is very exciting. Back to you, Kevin. And then Kevin also got this coverage from the local
Yeah.
CBS.
They were real excited when she learned that she didn't have to go to court anymore. So she sat me down and she's like, "Does this mean I don't have to go to court anymore?" And I was like, "Yeah, pretty much." She's like, so she gets tickets a lot. So I'm on traffic warrant and code infraction ODR. So basically, somebody can get pulled over and they get a traffic ticket in Farmers Branch, and that person can handle it any number of different ways that they want. The main thing that I try to remember behind Matterhorn in the way that online dispute resolution works is all it is it's a giant flow chart. That's really all it is, and it's just kind of like TMCEC puts out that great flow chart that's nasty. No offense, TMCEC. It just goes all over the place. That's basically what Matterhorn does. Is it basically feeds you through a system that you custom build and design with Matterhorn, so that your cases go to the right person at the right time and display the right information and only the information that they're allowed to see, or that individual's allowed to see. Different people are set up into work groups and queues, and then they're responsible for going in and working those queues on a daily basis. As time has gone by, like we had said, it has increased exponentially. More and more people want the solution. They already think that we have it, that type of thing, or should have had it. Mm-hmm. But it's really, one giant flow chart. And so for us, when they get the ticket, the person can log into the system. They can locate their information. They can make a request. They can, we'll just call it a complaint in the box area. And that's where people get to kind of voice their concerns. They want to enter a no contest or guilty plea, but they want to, they want to talk to the judge, which so many people do.
That's right.
And this at least gives them that space to be able to, for the judge to hear it. And for them to actually be heard, I think is even more important. If they pled not guilty, we go to the prosecutor. She makes recommendations on a daily basis as well. Then they get funneled to the judge and to the citizen for approval or rejection. And that's pretty much it. It's a very, very simple process. And I think a lot of times we like to overcomplicate it. So I don't want to get too deep into the weeds. So when you go to the next slide, it says it starts via a person's search. So like this is what our search screen actually looks like. And I love how it came out really, really pretty. They've already got the state seal and everything. It looks great. The colors are wonderful. Everything about it is really smooth, and I love the flow of the website itself. The search method is really easy, and I'll tell you all the downsides at the end, and that way they can work on getting those changed for me. So they just go on here. We actually were able to remove all of a lot of the options that we had to type down on the ticket. So our ticket was not 5 feet long anymore. And we just took all that off. And now it just says visit eCourt, basically. So to find out more about your ticket, go to this website. So, but they would go in here and search. Once they have searched, if it returns anything, it is going to go to the next slide, which says like one result found. This was actually a speeding ticket, which we get a ton of. And that person can either request review, or they can also choose other options. They choose other options. It's going to be with the address, phone number, things like that. So when they hit request review, it's going to analyze a couple of different things. It's going to take a look at, well, really what we set up at the beginning. So what we set up as a template, you know, okay, so speeding tickets that are 25 miles and over the posted speed limit, those are not eligible for this and this and this, period. Those go to the judge, kind of a thing. So what you can do is we kind of took our standing orders, built them into all of our rules, put in our offenses what people were eligible for, and age limits, and all the criteria. And I'm sure it's, yeah, I did hear it was spaghetti. So, and it will go through and analyze that information, and then when you hit request review, it's only going to populate things that you're actually eligible for. So the site in itself is very intuitive. So when a person goes in, they may tell us that they didn't see an option for something. Well, it's because they weren't eligible for that option, because y'all have already knocked it out of the running. So they don't actually have to go through that process. It's being able to also visually see it on the screen for me, those choices. So if you go to that next slide where it talks about you enter your plea, complain in the box, we always ask if they want the prosecutor to review their case, no matter what. And then we also want to know if there's people that just want to go straight to trial. And we've run into good things and bad things doing it that way. So I'm still kind of at 50-50 on how we want to proceed forward on that. But, you know, most people actually, I think, like getting the offer ahead of time. And then being able to kind of be done with it. Now, I will say that our process from that docket to our pretrial docket used to be about 30 to 45 days. So between those two dockets. So you got to add that onto the time it took to get a disposition of the case. So it's got an add or remove files link in here, so that's important. They can upload copies of their driver's license and insurance and things like that. So again, here it's asking for their pleas.
I'll put it on the next slide that's showing the options.
Okay. So the person chooses what they're interested in. They can provide more information that would aid either Nicole or the prosecutor or the judge as to their special circumstance as to what's actually happened. So the other thing, and the thing I fell in love with, was when Terry came out and showed me the system, was like the notification process. So if you go to the next slide, the notification process is fantastic. So every time something happens, at least it seems like it, every time something happens, you get a text and you get an email. I get really excited. You get a text and you get an email, and you can go in there and click the link, and it'll take you to your page of information, and it will actually show you where it is in the process, and give you a link to kind of just go in and take a look at it. So let's see what it says on the next slide. If we have a, yeah. So when you go on to that, it basically has, you know, processing, it sent to clerk, sent to judge, sent to prosecutor, sent to, and so it'll show where it's at in that process, and you'll just kind of see it jump around, which is nice. So
So I think the next step would be for Nicole to share what it's like for her when she receives a notification that somebody has requested prosecutor review, because we're taking through this sample case. I just want to make sure if someone could chat me that the slides are still showing okay for you. I want to make sure that you still can see them. I'm just a little nervous about.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. All right, so I'm Nicole. Thank you, Nicole.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Nicole Corr. I'm the prosecutor here in Farmers Branch. So I'm actually a contract prosecutor. I'm only out there actually 1 day a week. So when Kevin came to me with this about his idea, I was like, well, this would be great. That would make it so much easier so I could actually look at these cases throughout the week when I'm, at my actual law firm and be able to do these pleas without having, to just do it on 1 day a week. What you're seeing now is basically I get an email about 5:30 a.m. I don't check it at 5:30, but whenever I do check my email, I have this in my inbox and I click the link, I sign on, and this is what I see. And so I go in there and I click let's do this and sign in, and it will show me how many people have asked for a prosecutor review. And so I will click on that, and I can go into each case individually and start reviewing it. I think from the previous slide you saw where they, so this would be the next screen. So this is the person, one person that would be in my queue. So I would click on that and you'll see it tells you what the offense is, who it is, and the citation number. So this is the next page once you click on that that individual, and you'll see what we've actually tailored this, and we've kind of tweaked it here and there because there's certain information that I obviously need before I can make a recommendation. And one of that is well, how fast were they actually going? When was the citation issued? What's the fine amount? Things like that. And so we created, this screen here. So all that information is already in there. And so if I want to reduce the fine, that top box, I can actually manipulate that. If I want to drop it by $20, then I'll, put in there, my offer would be, $214. And then the payment due date, we actually tailor it so I could just put the number of days it would be due, which is either, 30 or 60. And then if I'm going to offer what we have here in Texas is called deferred adjudication. It's basically a probationary period for a set amount of time. Typically it's 90 days. For some offenses, it could be 180 days. And as long as they don't get any more citations during that deferral period, this particular ticket is actually dismissed and it doesn't go on the record. It's not reported to anybody, not reported to insurance. And so in this box, I can actually put the number of deferral days that I want. And like I said, typically it's 90 days. And then I just click submit and it goes to the defendant and he can review it and decide whether or not they want to take that plea offer. The other thing that's helpful, and I don't think you can see it on this screen, but at the if you go further down, it tells you, how they pled. If there's any notes from the staff, there may be a note in there saying, we've already checked, like they're over 25 years old. And that's important because in Texas, if you're under 25 and you have a speeding ticket, you're also required to do a driver safety course. And so if the staff has already alerted me to that, then I can add that as a requirement. And what I'll typically do when I add these certain requirements like that, I'll put it in that note box, and then I'll click underneath where it says share this note with defendant before I submit it. So that way, when the defendant receives it, he not only gets, the reduced fine amount, the number of days it would be due, and the deferral period, but he also sees my note to him saying, in addition, you will have to also take driver safety course. Or for example, if they didn't have insurance, I'll require that they have insurance for that entire deferral period. And that's where I'll put that information, and I could share it with the defendant. I don't know if, next slide. Okay, and then this is where it goes to the judge. I think, Kevin, you could probably handle this one because I don't see it. Once I hit submit, I don't know what happens to it.
Oh, really? Okay, so basically we'll just kind of do an overall on the judges, and his is not too difficult, but the judge gets in things from everyone really. So some things will come to him straight from the clerk. Some things would come straight from you, and then other things would go from you to the clerk to the judge. And really what it is the judge is going in and he's looking at the information that he's allowed to take a look at. So but he's reviewing all of it, and he'll take into consideration your notes, anything that you've put in there in the comment section, whether you wanted it shared with the defendant or not. And basically he'll make a ruling at that point on your recommendation. So what happens is at that point, they either get rejected by the court, or if he approves the offer, it goes out to the defendant. The defendant would get a notification for the approval where they actually do have to accept or reject a specific offer. So they don't just get to like, yay, okay, you did it. They actually have to click a button, which may not seem real binding nowadays, or may not have used to be, but yeah, it's pretty powerful now. So we're actually going to be, we're working on getting the signature widget as well, just because it's nice to be able to have someone's signature. Because if 15 years later and their signature is still the same, you'd be like, see, this is how you wrote 10 years ago. So, and they're like, oh, that is me. So, so yeah, we're working on getting the signature widget so that people can sign. But until then, we do have they're required to either accept or reject an offer. And then it would kick back to the municipal court for us to finalize anything that we needed. And they would get a link then to make their payment.
And so this is the screen showing that decision, and then the next screen is showing what happens when they choose accept and submit.
The reason that it has to go to the clerk first for us is we want the person to actually have all their terms and conditions of the deferred offer. So the clerk actually goes in and prepares that information prior to it going to the judge. So that it's actually attached. The other really great thing about Matterhorn is that this information is out here now. So that if they have that link, at any time they can go in and pull their own information. I'm assuming, what is y'all's retention on that? I don't know that you had one.
Tell me again, so people can go back and check the status of their case at any point. So if it's with Nicole or with the judge, they can see on that sidebar where it is in the process. But you guys are pretty fast, so I'm not sure there's many people waiting on you to deal with their case. But they do have the ability to log in or come back before they've received that notification to return if there is something waiting for them. And I think I said that wrong. If there is something waiting for them, they will be notified. If they haven't been notified, they can still check. Because sometimes people get impatient, but like I said, you guys at Farmers Branch are pretty fast. So
I'll say it's very hard to give over the expectation of what people want and expect nowadays. So I mean, the way that I also looked at this is, I know a lot of people are afraid of technology and court and things like that, but I don't know, the way that I look at it is it's just like an online payment, just like an internet payment for me. And it really, I don't necessarily want to put so much weight on the physical appearance, because in essence, a lot of times people feel like they say, am I being punished? It's kind of like, no, this isn't supposed to be the punishment. So, yeah.
I think we had one more screen after this, and then we can get to some of the outcomes. And I'm seeing some questions jump in, and that's terrific. Oh, and I am hearing that maybe, Kevin, you might not be close enough to your, yeah, so if you could make sure, that you can speak a little louder, that would be helpful.
Is that better?
I think that sounds better. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So one more screen. This is that court dashboard. Just shows, so it may have looked really simple and we walked you through one example, but there we can handle some complexity too on the court side if needed. Kevin may be able to share if you want more about that.
Wait, say that again?
We're looking at that court dashboard now.
Yeah, so on here, this is basically what I see when I log in. So I get to see kind of if anyone's doing any work. Basically, you know, anytime that request comes in, it goes straight into this new request section. These are our modules up here, these tabs at the top where it says home, traffic, code enforcements, warrants, and arrest warrants. So those are our different modules that we have set up right now. We're going to be adding one soon, and I'm just putting a plug out there that's going to be attorney docket. So attorneys will be able to submit letters for their client for representation. Every day, the prosecutor would get a listing of those, and then she could actually do offers the next day. So at least that's the goal. And I think the attorneys are really going to be, they're going to love that. And that's going to save a ton of time and resources for attorneys and defendants and city staff. So it's going to be pretty expansive. But on the main screen, like, you can see literally where everyone is in the process. As you look on that far right column, it shows judge review. That means the judge has to look at it or has to approve it. The approved offers are the ones that need their paperwork done, but the judge has already approved it, but the clerk hasn't prepared their stuff and they haven't accepted it. So prosecutor review, explanatory. So everything goes into these different queues so that we know where it is that they're supposed to be going. The one thing that we did add was a two-way channel so that if somebody, because so many people were just submitting one thing, like their driver's license, and we're like, it says driver's license and insurance. So we added the ability to kick it back to them and ask for certain information, and then they can type information if they want to back. But they only get that if we actually initiate it and say, hey, we're missing some stuff, or hey, you're not eligible for this. And in those cases, we do.
So Kevin, I'm going to rush you a little bit. I want to make sure we leave enough time for questions. I want to basically talk through some of the outcomes, and then we can open it up for questions. I see some questions coming in. Thank you everyone for your questions. I'm going to start with some of the outcomes because some of this is data that we collect, and then Nicole and Kevin both have some outcomes to share too. Just so you know, one of the things that we do with Matterhorn is make sure that there's a customer satisfaction survey that goes out to everyone who goes through this process, and customer satisfaction being the member of the public who initiated their ticket resolution on the Farmers Branch website. And so this is the Farmers Branch data back. We asked questions like, would they have been able to come to court in person if this hadn't been there for them? Farmers Branch stands out. It's got a higher average of no answer to that question than the other courts that we see. Typically we see more around 40%, whereas 52% of the people who use Matterhorn for Farmers Branch say they would not have otherwise been able to come to court. I don't know, and then and again, we have very high usage of people on mobile devices. So people are coming to court on this rather than on a laptop or a tablet or a desktop computer. 73% if you include the tablets are coming on a smaller screen device. So that's pretty impressive and higher than average for courts that use Matterhorn. I don't know if there's anything specific about your location that makes you think that why this is. Kevin or Nicole, maybe it's the interstates or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can't talk about the device type other than everybody's on their phone nowadays. It's much easier to carry your computer, you know, in your pocket. But as far as that 52% ability to come to court, I think a lot of that has to do with where Farmers Branch is actually located. You know, as Kevin explained, we are a suburb of Dallas. And so 635, which is a major interstate, is one of our borders. And so a lot of people are just driving through, you know, they're driving from Dallas to Fort Worth or vice versa, you know, between home and work. And so when they're stopped on these interstates and they get a speeding ticket, well, they don't live in Farmers Branch. You know, they could live, you know, 60 miles away. And it's more difficult for them to have to come all the way back to Farmers Branch, sit in the courtroom just to talk to somebody to deal with their ticket. And so I think that's why we see a higher percentage of people not being able to come to court in person.
I'm going to go to the next one. We survey people. Part of that survey is we ask them about fairness, the perception of fairness, and 76% said they felt that their online process was fair. Is that consistent, Nicole and Kevin, with what people say when they're coming in person?
I think it's actually higher than the response we get in person. I can tell you that from people that I meet with. Usually after they they'll agree to the plea and they're like, this just isn't fair. I can't tell you how many times I hear that. But again, I think this is much higher than what I see in person. So I'm glad to see that.
Yep, no, it's a nice number. This next one I'm going to give to Kevin. These are your data, changing compliance over time.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we started to do a look as, I actually noticed a visual change in the courtroom. We have arraignments every Thursday, and I noticed that we have a ton of FTAs. I don't know about y'all, but like,
Kevin, if you could speak up again, I'm sorry.
We have a ton of FTAs and failure to appears. And I would say in 2017, probably 50 to 60% of the people that didn't show up just didn't show up at all. No call, no show, total failure to appear. They didn't do anything afterwards. They didn't do anything. They just completely ignored it. Yeah. So it was about 50, 60% of the people we had docketed. I began to notice when Matterhorn was implemented, there were fewer and fewer people in the courtroom, but there were fewer FTAs being issued. Where it's gotten to the point now where basically on a court day, I see half the number of people, literally 50% of the number of people in that room than would be if we didn't have Matterhorn. Now, when we looked at the stats and kind of pulled it, it was a 31% decrease, and this is just from January until July of 2018 versus our 2017, so we just did 1 year. There was a 31% decrease in our FTA and VPTAs that were issued. So there's a lot of different things that kind of go into that, but at the same time, to me, I think that that's really great that that percentage has gone down. As far as customer satisfaction, did you read that response yet?
Yeah, so there is this response which we showed earlier, which people are able to type in a text response. Was there anything that you'd like to tell us about your experience? And this was someone who was pretty happy with the ease for them. And I won't read it because I think we're actually, I want to slip over to questions. I'm seeing some good questions come in. So just to say, we get the court gets nice feedback via the survey for sure. And then there's a quick ODR response, court staff from Kevin, the table, looking at the pros and cons, what your experience was.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are afraid to do stuff like this, and it was hard, and we fell on our face a few times, and all I did was tell people, this is a new process, and you can help us shape it. So,
right.
But yeah, I mean, I love it. It's exciting, and the best part of well, specifically you as a vendor, not necessarily ODR as a whole, but we finally found a subscription-based service that is not a payment processor, is not a collections company. And I could not believe it. Like, I was just waiting for them to break my heart and say, if we can have your collections. No, you understand, it happens every time. You give us
Fair
your
enough.
collections fee. So, but yeah, the clerks there also thought I was trying to get rid of their jobs. And they have found out that this is a big pain and that it's a lot of work. So it's not going to get rid of their jobs. So now they're actually kind of mad. And the phones can be a little bit tiring at times, but that's also good because you don't necessarily have somebody right in front of you or in front of your face. But a lot of times those phone calls can be difficult with people that are technologically challenged.
Got it. So you're still getting phone calls. They may be slightly different now.
Right.
Some people are happy to hear that there is an online option, and some people need your support to get through it. I want to move quickly to Nicole for your thoughts on the difference before and after for you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the slide kind of gives you the stats, but as I was saying, you know, before we would have a pro se docket, which pro se is somebody who represents themselves. They have already entered a not guilty plea with the judge, and so then they come to see to me, which is our pretrial docket essentially. We hold it the first Tuesday of every month. And when I first started in Farmers Branch about a year ago, I mean, I was seeing, I mean, you're talking like 70 to 90 people sitting in this courtroom, and every single one I'd have to call up and talk to, explain their options, and it's basically the same speech over and over and over again. Now with Matterhorn, because it streamlines all that, and like I was saying, I mean, I can field these on a daily basis, either from my home, from my law office, and it clears it out. So now on those first Tuesdays of every month, I'm only seeing maybe 20 to 30 people. And what was taking me, you know, 3 hours at a minimum, we're now down to about an hour. So I've seen a vast improvement in those numbers. And like I said, when I do the Matterhorn online pleas, you know, I'm still assessing all the same information. You know, they've already been explained what their options are. And I also think that they may be even heard a little bit more on Matterhorn because we have that box where they can complain, and I read every single one of those, and I take those into consideration. Where when you're in the cattle call, you know, I like to be able to hear people's side of things, but again, I mean, I'm limited. I've got 90 people sitting in the courtroom. So I think that this overall has been just really great.
And do you have anything you want to say about safety, your perception of safety with this?
Just quickly. So, you know, it's our day and age, but we've had a couple people who come into court who, you know, we just don't feel safe around. And we don't actually, our court does not have a metal detector. So the only thing we have is we have an armed bailiff in the courtroom. And there's been a handful of times where I've had the bailiff had to come and stand next to me because we've had somebody who was, you know, about to lunge across the table at me over his speeding ticket. But with Matterhorn, it, you know, kind of keeps the crazies, you know, on the other side of a computer, which is helpful.
Yeah, so it's gives people at arm's length, perhaps. All right. I'm going to skip this section entirely, and we'll go right to questions. And during the questions, I'm going to keep this panelist and contact info slide up so that you can see contact info for Nicole and Kevin directly in case your question isn't answered. So I'm going to pull some questions out of the Q&A. I see also there's some questions showing up in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. And anyone that come in that we don't get to, we promise we'll follow up with you afterwards. So let me go to some of the folks that started early. Let's see, Susie Garcia. The sample showed the defendant entered a not guilty plea, but still wanted options to keep off the record. So this is a question about, specifically about the procedure. When do you address that? In order to have a deferral, they will need to plead no contest or guilty. And if did I read that too quickly, or can you answer that, either Kevin or Nicole?
I can kind of answer that. So when, basically when Nicole gets that information and she reviews it and says, okay, well, they do want information on this. In her, either her typed response, but also we send back their deferred order, their typed out deferred order. It plainly says at the top that you're hereby entering a plea of no contest or guilty. And it's just like any other standard form. And so, and I believe that Nicole would say, I know you do it in person, but do you do it on Matterhorn where you say you're entering a no contest plea? Do you take any type of notes like that?
I don't actually. This is something that Kevin and I, you know, have been trying to work on. But when he first approached this with me, that was one of my concerns: was how are these people going to know what their options are if they choose, you know, this option versus the other? And so he worked with Matterhorn to explain that. My understanding is that most of that is actually explained before they get to me. And and then like I said, the only thing that I really tell them is, here's my offer as far as the fine, the deferral, time to pay, and then any other additional things that I need to put on there. Now, there is also an option if I don't want to offer a plea and I think that there is more here that I need to understand. I can actually recommend that they just come into court in person. But that's very few and far between because, like I said, most of this can actually be resolved just on the platform.
And this may be a follow-up to that. It was asked by the same person. Does the defendant have a back and forth with the prosecutor first, a discussion per se, before the prosecutor sends a recommendation to the judge?
Typically not a back and forth, because like we said, we have that complaint box that they have there, and that's what comes to me. And so I will review all of that. And so if something comes up where I may need to look a little bit further into this, like for example, we had a guy who got a parking ticket. And in his little box, he said, I was out of the country. Maybe my son was driving it, but I was not driving this car. And so I sent a little note to him where, I showed you note share with defendant and said, this ticket may be eligible for dismissal if defendant provides proof, that he was actually out of the country to the court. And he actually did that. And so yesterday I got confirmation from the staff that he had actually come into court, provided that information. I looked at it and I recommended dismissal.
Fair enough. I'm looking at, thank you. I'm looking at some of the questions that were asked in the webinar chat as well. One person asked if this is being recorded to view later. I can answer that. Yes, it will be. We'll send you that link. There's a question of Leah Huff asked, can you explain and show the documentation provided to the defendant? I think maybe we'll pick that up afterwards. There's a question from Rosa Junqueiro. So you allow surrender on warrants to appear online. I assume the warrants and arrest tabs are for cases with outstanding warrants. Can you explain the warrants and arrest tabs, please?
Yeah, so warrants and arrests came up during the last legislative session, and we really wanted an easy, quick, effective way to deal with people that were going to start showing up at our clerk's window that the warrant didn't really have a whole lot of oomph to it, I guess you could say. But we wanted some place where we could send defendants and they could actually fill out an ability to pay or enter a plea and do things on their case, even though it was in a warrant status, and get that ball rolling as far as, the judge being able to assess their ability to pay, getting them set for a hearing. We've got that set up now to where all of that can be done online, and you can essentially have your warrants lifted and basically be set for court if the judge wants that done. So
I'm looking through, I'm listening and I'm simultaneously reading, so I'm a little slow off the mark. There's a question about who pays. So Priscilla Ibarra asks, is the case processing cost passed on to the defendant, or does your city absorb the cost?
We absorb the cost because it's not very, for us, it has not been too bad. So it's the whole idea behind a subscription-based service is fantastic. I'm so happy. So.
I think there were other folks too. One question from, I think Judge Del Carmen, how to convince decision maker that the money is ultimately worth it. How are you able to do that, Kevin, to get buy-in on a system like this?
So for us, we have reminder or warning statements or like, hey, this is going to be your last offer. If you go to trial, you're not going to get an offer. Or if you get an offer, it may not be a good offer. It may be an offer that's a little bit more than this. But we try to point out the fact that it could be, they're not going to get the same thing when they come back to court. So
actually, I'm guessing that question was for decision maker at the court budgeting side. To go, but I think you maybe already answered that by saying it wasn't an incredibly steep cost.
Yeah.
Yes, the money for ODR. Thank you for the clarification. Yeah.
Totally
Anything else
affordable.
to add for how you can maybe convinced, if some people would like to move forward, how you were able to get buy-in on the process?
And I guess I did have to get buy-in. You were kind of around for some of that, but for other reasons. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely for us. It was about, I had something written out, and I don't remember what it was for. But for us, it was, you see all this stuff going on in the justice system and legal things happening and laws changing, and I simply asked my city manager and finance director, I said, well, which side of the debate do you want to end up on? I was like, do you want to end up and be this person over here in history, or you want to be this person over here in history?
So
Man, that's the truth.
truth.
That's the reality of it. Who do you want to be as a city? Because that's not my call. That's your council's call.
Yeah.
So who is it that you want to be? And we made the decision that we wanted to be a city where justice was accessible to anyone, no matter what. So
I see a question from Edith Prim. Do you ever use online mediation for these cases? I'll put in a quick thing. We have a separate product in Matterhorn that is used for mediation that is not what is in Farmers Branch. So this answer will be for Kevin and his court, not necessarily Matterhorn ODR. Go ahead, Kevin, you can answer that.
Nicole, no. I don't consider it mediation.
No, not really. No, I would just say no. We don't really use it for mediation.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of what percentage of your citations are getting resolved using ODR solution? I imagine with you, because you're kind of trending, that percentage is changing month over month in your mind. Right. What is that number now, to answer Rosa Junqueiro's question?
I don't think it's huge, but I do think it's probably 3 to 4%.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
Another question about how you're using it from Priscilla Ibarra. Is this service only available to new cases or cases that are also in warrant? You may have answered that one when you talked about the warrants.
You would really work that out with Matterhorn yourself. If you want all of your cases to be available, if you want just your warrant cases to be available, if you want just your traffic, whatever it is that you want to be available, they should be able to write it that way.
Just skimming. I know we just have a minute left. It will be recorded to view later. We are going to post the slides. There's contact information for both Kevin and Nicole here on the screen. You can always get a hold of me. There are some questions that we didn't get to, and we will answer those with you offline. I want to thank you for taking an hour out of your day. We've got a good group of people that hung on for an hour with us to learn about ODR for contesting and resolving misdemeanors in Texas. And I want to thank you for your attention and your support, and wish you all the best in bringing access to more people in your jurisdictions all over the world. So thank you. Thank you to Kevin and Nicole for joining us today. Very much appreciate your willingness to share your experience and help spread the word and educate the folks who are interested. So thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.